Hello, welcome to day two of the African American Church and Social Justice, course number 8035. Again, thank you to our national president, Dr. Jerry Young, our national Congress president, Dr. Elliot Cuff, Dr. Elliot Cuff, and also our technology our director, Dr. Alvin Love. I'm Pastor Scott Anquay, the proud pastor of the St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church in the city of Chicago, your instructor for our Digiversity course. We're going to resume from where we left off. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Some things that we discussed in lesson one, the title of the course. Also, if you're picking up from lesson one, we encourage you to get the book To Serve This Present Age, Social Justice Ministry in the Black Church by Daniel L. Ayers and Reginald W. Williams, Jr. We also will have other reading material as also other assignments that are given out during the course of the week. So we encourage you to please embrace each and every assignment so you can get the most out of this course. Now, again, when we look at the state of the church and social justice, there's a lot of language or a lot of words that are floating around: prejudice, privilege, social justice, sexism, heterosexism, bias, unconscious bias, things like that. And so this leads into the whole thing of social justice and why a dominant culture has certain privileges and has caused social oppression, especially in African-American community and communities of brown and Black people. And so we wanted to make sure we understood that your goal of today, or the goal in this course, is really to call the church. This purpose of this class is to be faithful to the call of God in Christ on the church. We as the church have a responsibility. If we're the Church of Jesus Christ, it only makes sense that we follow or emulate the mission and ministry of Christ. And so each student will investigate the topics of social justice. You will explore that. I would ask for you to do some outside research so that you can build up your foundation on what the definition is. Also, listen to some opposing views on why social justice is not necessary, so that it helps formulate your view. But the most important thing is to understand that we have been in this struggle for a long time. There are people that have come before us that have worked for the liberation of our people. And in today's society, clearly, the subject of social justice is absolutely necessary because there are so many things that are going on. The civil upheaval after George Floyd's death, of course, the protesting, and that has not stopped. And then also the state of poverty, then the discourse in the government, and then dealing with COVID-19 and disparities that we have seen and how it has affected the African-American community. So there's reasons why that the voice of the church should be heard, especially in this season. And so we wanted to understand what social justice is. And I recall sharing with you that social justice is the fair and just relation between the individual and society. This is super important. The individual stands at a position of what is owed to them or what society should be doing, but then also what is their responsibility back to society. When we think about social justice, there must be an emphasis on breaking down barriers for social mobility, the creation of safety nets, and economic justice. And so that's the role of the church when we start speaking up against social justice. And so there must be a reciprocal relationship that I shared, society to society. And listen, they're mediated by differences in cultural traditions, some which emphasize the individual's responsibility towards society, and others the equilibrium between access to power and the responsible use of it. And so we went through some of the things that are going on in our society right now, and what are the issues we're facing: Black Lives Matter, poverty, over-policing, community hopelessness, COVID-19. And so we want to make sure that we address all of these things as we continue to talk about social justice. One of your homework assignments was to view the film or the documentary, I Am Not Your Negro, and I hope that you did do that. There's so much to gain from watching that 1 hour and 33-minute documentary, where James Baldwin's unfinished work is put into a documentary where he really talks about the death of 3 people that were very close to him, and Medgar Evers, Dr. Martin Luther King, as well as Malcolm X. And so when we talk about the death of these 3 and how it affected society and his way of thinking, and then largely even how he thought about America and his role in America and how he felt America looked at him, these themes are still prevalent today. We're still fighting for access to actually vote because of voter suppression. We're still actually fighting for jobs and economic mobility. We're still fighting against poverty and systems that have been put in place to make sure that people stay poor. And so James Baldwin brings a light to all of this, and he actually puts the onus on America and not on the Black person. It's not our fault to deal, it's not our responsibility to deal with systemic racism. It's America's responsibility to deal with systemic racism. So we can't get to the point where we feel that we have to take that responsibility. But what we have as a church need to do is to cry out to make sure that America takes up its responsibility to handle these issues. When we see how the NBA has responded, now when you watch the games, you know, they have painted on the floor, Black Lives Matter. They finally got it. They finally got it. And then even in the NFL, they're starting to talk and get it, because they realize that these players who they actually literally use to make billions, not millions, billions of dollars on are carrying a heavy load, because they see the people in their communities or people that look like them suffering so unnecessarily. Only if we would just learn to share and give a little back, or put the resources where they actually are needed, to allow everyone to experience this thing that we call the American dream. And so again, if you have not watched it, I would encourage you to take a peek at it, and you will be blessed. And thank you for those of you that actually emailed me saying you actually watched it and share with me your comments. I do appreciate that. And again, hopefully you got something out of it. And so the church in social justice, again, Jesus preached his first sermon out of Luke 4:18, where he really talked about bringing the good news to the poor, proclaiming the release of the captives, recovering of the sight of the blind, and also actually to allow the oppressed to go free. And so we want to make sure that if Jesus preached on these things, then surely we should be concerned about what he preached about. And so we want to continue to look at the historic role of the church. And we know that there's many diversity of beliefs in the church, but that does not keep us from doing what God has called us to do. And so the Black Christian today means that we must speak up and not be tied to a monolithic view of the church, but actually think about the diversity in the church and the things that we can offer to this subject. And so chapter 1 talked about getting on board, understanding of social justice. We reviewed things in chapter 1. What is the church saying as far as politics and social justice? We must address the harsh realities in Black America. And so if Dr. Martin Luther King fought against it, and even though he ran into some opposition, even in this fight, we're not going to worry about that. We're going to continue to push forward. And so we discussed charity and justice, helping us understand what charity is and what justice is, the care of the soul. The book actually covers that in chapter number 1. I would encourage you to look at that, because many times what we thought was social justice, because we were feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, we were maybe visiting even the prisoners. We were not speaking out against the systems that have caused the poor to be poor, and the homeless to be homeless, and the naked to be naked, and those that are in prison to be in prison unjustly. And so we have to move into a realm of actually justice, so that we continue to make sure that we get to the point where we are fighting against systems, systematic racism, systematic injustice that continues to perpetuate the unbalance that's going on in our society. And so we talked about the definition of charity: goodwill towards love of humanity, generosity, helpfulness. The church by large has been doing that. We look forward to doing that on a regular basis. But we have to move it further into justice, and justice is the maintenance or the administration of what is just, making sure we understand how justice actually looks. And so Dr. King, and I'll remind you of his quote: "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one indirectly affects all indirectly." And so please keep that in mind. You can't get out of life ignoring the realities of life. We must continue to push so that all will receive the inalienable rights that we proclaim that are afforded to every American. And so I talked about the biblical foundations of social justice. We again looked at those scriptures that are the basis for what we do when it comes to justice. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? In the King James Version, you'll read to love mercy, to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. But however you frame it, whatever words you use, it's really about doing what is right and understanding that mercy is required of us. If we want mercy, then we have to be merciful. And then we have to understand that we have to walk humbly with our God, which is our responsibility. So again, we already dispelled that thought that what happens on Sunday morning does not affect what happens Monday through Saturday. We know that they're all interconnected, and the church as a body must be connected to the ills of society. It's no longer shouting on Sunday and then we go home and feel good all week. We must continue to worship, and everything we do, we need to bring glory to God. And so the prophets has actually framed what the church should be doing today. So the Black church has endured by rendering both social service and social justice. It's survived physically, mentally, and spiritually because of the prophetic ministers and laypersons. Backed by the church, many stood in opposition to hostile governments, rejected unjust policies, and lived out Micah's decree to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before the Almighty against great odds. And so there's great number of individuals that have done just that. And so we want to continue to reflect on, even today, we think about people like William Barber III, who leads the Poor People's Campaign, how he continues to cry out about the injustices. It's voices like that that we should be hearing, so that we can actually have compassion on those that are most affected by this systematic racism. And so we even discussed some of the, I call them the heroes and the sheroes of our past, and we want to be part of that. We want ourselves be considered heroes or sheroes because we stood up when it was unpopular to stand up. So I'm going to move you right to the point now. When we talk about the Freedom Summer, again, this was where people actually understood that it's one thing to actually talk, but it's another thing to walk the walk. And so people like Mary Lou Hammer, Fannie Lou Hammer emerged as a hero that summer, where She presented her body a living sacrifice, risking loss of shelter, breaking family bonds, living under constant death threats. And so these are the things that we have to continue to do and make sure that we are clear. We might not have to get on a bus to demonstrate that it's wrong to segregate bus riding, but we do need to continue to cry out about systems that are put in place that continue to be unjust and continue to disinvest in the communities of color. We have to fight for every dollar. We have to look at the census, make sure that people are filling out the census. We have to speak out against redlining of our neighborhoods. We have to speak out when we see legislators ignore communities of color. We have to speak out against when we see factories or polluting industries coming into communities of color. These are the things that are affecting us. We have to speak out about lead in water, the injustices in our environment. These are the things that we have to embrace now, even when, again, they risk us in our current status. And so we, consistent with a strong tradition, we must elect leaders with strong faith tradition or highly principled leaders. We must serve as a moral influence in society. We are duty bound to make the state better. Keep that in mind, duty bound to make the state better. That's what our responsibility is. And so the voice of the faith community must be heard. I can't say that enough. The challenge facing the Black church and anyone pursuing social justice is how to organize and mobilize post the time of the first elected person or a son of African descent. There is a myth that the country has entered into a post-racial society where we've seen what has happened the last 3.5 years with the current administration, how things are rolled back. Everything that was put in place almost has been dissolved because of the thoughts of society. You know, we hear now racist acts being more prevalent. We hear people saying things unimaginable that people would never say what's on their mind like that. And so we have to understand now we're in a polarized society. Our society has never been more polarized than it is right now. We are in a struggle, as candidate Biden has said, for the soul of our country. And whether he's elected president or not, we still got to fight for the soul of our country. And the soul of our country is really justice. We have to promote justice on every single level. Every single level. We are present with challenges in the form of globalization, assaults on collective bargaining, mass incarceration, labor migration, deregulation of industries, outsourcing, and the fight for workers' rights. And the list can go on and on and on. We are at a point now that if we don't stand up, everything that we fought for will be literally taken from us. Again, the systematic things that are being in place to oppress the vote. You know, the Voters' Rights Act was passed in 1965. Why is it that we still have to fight for the right to vote? Why do we have to deal with voter suppression in our communities, messaging that discourages people to go out and vote, or a lack of resources at polling places in African-American communities? Why do we have to fight systems in place that want to keep mail-in voting from happening when we know that people may be afraid to vote because of COVID-19? Again, you're taking this course at an unusual time because now we're doing virtual because we can't even come together because out of worry that somebody may get sick. And we know that because of health disparities in our community, we are more at risk of dying from a COVID-19 virus. So therefore, it's also being said that the country no longer has institutional social barriers that preclude citizens, primarily minorities, from achieving the American dream. Well, I got some news for you. That is not true. There are some systems in place, and we got to fight against those systems and make sure that the people that we care most about people that look like us have an opportunity. All we're looking for is an opportunity. I'm not asking you to give me anything. I'm asking you to just level the playing field. Let's put some equity in place. These are the conversations that we must have as the church, and pastors are at every pulpit must have a theology of social justice, especially during this time. It's not enough to shout to people on Sunday and forget about the despair Monday through Saturday. We have to have a theology that speaks of the social justice ills in our society. We must incorporate that into our messaging to encourage our people that that's the conversation they need to be having on a continual basis. And so, what are the issues facing your community? All over the country, communities of color are facing a gamut of issues, and some rise up to position number one, depending on the community you're in. Maybe violence, mass incarceration, maybe homelessness, maybe poverty, depending on what area you live in the country. But there are some issues that are facing all of us. And these issues, poverty, joblessness, environmental justice issues, water justice, food scarcity, pollution, mass incarceration, bail reform, healthcare reform, COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, police shootings, inner city violence. And this is just, again, to name a few, but you can look and pick from this list on some of the things that you know are happening within your neighborhoods, your communities. And so, again, we can't ignore what's actually happening. And so when we think about the poverty in the United States, the sad thing is that a reflection chart from 2000 to 2015 identified that even though we are suffering from a poverty rate of 24.1% in 2015. And actually that has even gotten greater in the last year. And so when we look at this poverty rate compared to our white counterparts in the US, the poverty rate is at a medium 13.5. Of course, we exceed that, almost doubling it. And then whites are at a 9.1% poverty rate. Asians at 11.4%. Even Hispanics have a less poverty rate than African Americans. And so we have to deal with why we're dealing with these systems. On a national level, again, a reflection of how Blacks are experiencing poverty at 24%. The state that I'm in Illinois, we're at 23%. This is just unacceptable. And so we want to really, and you can look up your own poverty rates by doing a poverty rate. Just type into Google. You can also type in the Henry J. Kaiser family and look at what they are sharing as far as poverty rates if you want some updated rates. But it's important for you to look at and see these rates so that you'll understand the disparities that we are facing in our communities. The poor, those who Jesus called the least of these, are not properly cared for today as the proliferation of mass incarceration continues to spread in this area of the new Jim Crow. Again, a book that I would encourage you to read is called The New Jim Crow, and it's by Michelle Alexander, attorney Michelle Alexander. That would be a book that I would put into my library because she not only talks about the poor, but she talks about this thing about mass incarceration that's part of the system that services and keeps African Americans poor. These charts here about when you think about the imprisonment, the reason why many of our families are poor because we pull resources out of our communities, out of our family households. When you think about state prisons, if we 1,351,000 people are locked up in state prisons, local jails 646,000, federal prisons 211,000. Largely, these that are being put in prison are because of drug offenses. These drug offenses are part of our society breakdown because we either self-medicate ourselves because of mental illness and other issues, or we go into business for ourselves trying to sell drugs. And when I say we, I'm saying as a community, what we see in our communities when we see people are peddling marijuana and all kinds of other illicit drugs on the corner. And these are largely locked up because they're largely targeted by the police. And so we see that also when we break down these 1 in 5 incarcerated people are locked up for drug offense. That's 1 in 5 people are locked up for drug offenses, again, targeting our community. And then when we look even further, how many people are locked up in the state of Illinois where I'm at, we see that is a reflection. We mirror very much what's happening on a national level, but in the local jails, 21,000, which we have done reduce significantly through some efforts of fighting mass incarceration in the state of Illinois. But even in the state of Illinois, when you look at percentages, per 100,000 people, African Americans or Blacks represent jail population by 2,128 people compared to 258 in the white community. And so this is something, it may be startling, but lets you know that we actually have a problem. And it's not much different in other places in America. It's not much different when we look at the population in jails. We are only 13% of the national population, but we are 40% of the occupants in jails. Absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. Where whites are 64% of the national population, and they represent 39% of the jails, which just 1% or less. So how can we be outpacing them? We can't be doing all of the crime. That's why I say you gotta take a moment and just say, I gotta wake up and understand what's going on. When we look at the next census tract, what will it look like in 2020? And what will be the population of the Blacks, and then what will be the population of those in prison? So your next homework assignment will be tonight is to look at the documentary by Ava DuVernay. If you have not already seen it, it's called 13th. This is an important piece of film or media presentation, because it shows us the reality. At one point, we thought we were free, but this documentary unveils how unfree we actually are. For the 13th Amendment, which was passed in the Senate in 1864 and then by the House in 1865, it says that the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolishes slavery and involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime. Well, I want you to understand that except as punishment for a crime, when you see the documentary, you'll see how the director shows us that we have been locked up even at this point of from 1865 on for offenses that really we shouldn't be locked up for, and disproportionately than any other group of people. And so, so that they can create a system that they can put us back into involuntary servitude. Even though slavery was abolished, they found a way to continue to lock up and continue to work us for free. And so when we think about how this country was built, it was built on the blacks, in the backs of African Americans, slaves. Slaves built those beautiful buildings that we see in Washington, D.C. Slaves built many of the buildings in southern and even in northern cities. Don't get fooled. We must recognize that there has been some involuntary servitude to build many of the structures we see in our country, and that we hold so near and dear to our heart. it was built on the backs of folks that were forced to work. And so I want you to watch that. And then when you watch that, again, the best way for you to communicate that you did watch it is on Netflix, is on Amazon. You just can type in 13 and view it, and you will see how powerful. And if you already seen it, take a look at it again. It will be something for your whole church to watch. I showed it at my church, 13th, and helped mobilize our social justice ministry, so that when we understand why we need to care for those that are in prison and the systems that have been put in place. And even the author of this, or the director, refers to the book about from Michelle Alexander, and they're tied together. So get that book, The New Jim Crow, and watch the documentary 13 tonight, so that you will see how these levels of injustice were perpetuated by legislation, by laws. And even right now, there are laws that are put in place that promote that same kind of inequity. Bruce Weston of the Harvard University said in 2008, we're living in an era of mass imprisonment that has transformed a generation of young Black men who form the core of a permanently disadvantaged population. The prison is no important, no chiefly for effects of crime, but for its effects on social and economic inequality. That means the crime rate does not go down because you put people in prison. It's not a deterrent. It only causes social and economic inequality, instability in our communities. And so since President Nixon declared a war on drugs in 1971, and President Reagan in the 80s, a campaign that one of his top aides later confessed was meant to criminalize Blacks, the state and federal prison population has increased by more than 700%. Increases have continued even though periods of declining crime. Crime goes down, but the prison system seems to get more occupants. It doesn't make much sense. And so this is a good, I'm going to go back. This is a good spot to stop and look at our, for lesson number 2, so we can talk about criminality and criminal injustices. And so I want you to look at the documentary 13 and share with that. When you do your homework tonight, and please go ahead and start reading chapters 2 and 3. We're going to resume on to the next lesson on the discovering the power of partnerships. And so it's important for you to read that particular chapter. If we were together, we would have a lot more conversation. I'm going to load this onto the platform. I'm going to try to visit some of the chats to see what the comments and feedback are. If we can't do it there, then I please encourage you to email me whatever comments you may have. I'm going to actually load inside the chat a file, which is the syllabus, so you don't have to worry about me emailing it to you. I'm going to load it here in a chat for you. Okay, so that's get loaded in the chat. If you watch if you're watching this, hopefully you'll be able to grab it off of the chat. I will try to get it on that Digi platform also, but if it's in the chat now, so when we send this uploaded, you should be able to grab it off the chat. If not, email me and I'll be able to email you the syllabus at the time you email me. Again, my email is pastorronque@aol.com. Again, this is Pastor Scott Onque, the pastor of the St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church, your instructor for the African American Church and social justice. Hopefully you are learning on your own and really being charged with how important this subject is to the church. And again, on our next lesson, let's look forward to discovering the power of partnerships and understanding how we build a social justice ministry. I will work on that later today and load it up for you. God bless and keep you, and may heaven shine upon you.